They say the Byrd farmhouse still stands at the far end of Stillwater Creek, its roof buckled like a spine, its windows blinded by dust. In the summer of 1877, the people of Monroe County learned that the two women living there, Prudence and Mercy Byrd, had not spoken to another soul in nearly 6 years. When the county doctor finally forced the door open, he found the house reeking of smoke, iron, and old sickness. The air itself seemed to remember pain. The sisters had been born to a farmer named Jonas Byrd, a man once respected for his land but feared for his temper. After their mother's death, the girls were rarely seen outside the property. By 1870, the rumor was that Jonas had gone blind and that the girls cared for him with strange devotion. By 1877, the neighbors whispered that he had died long ago, though no one had ever seen a funeral. When the sheriff's deputy entered the parlor, he found the floorboards warped and dark. An iron chain coiled down through a hole in the floor. It led to the cellar, where they found Jonas Byrd, alive but wasted, a man reduced to breath and bone. He tried to speak, but his tongue had gone pale and dry. He had been chained there for nearly 5 years. Prudence's diary was discovered inside a flour tin. Its pages told the story of 2 daughters who believed their father's sin had poisoned the bloodline, and that the only way to cleanse it was to keep him below the earth until God decided otherwise. The first entries were almost gentle. "Father prays for mercy," she wrote, "but mercy is something we no longer own." What followed was not madness, it was ritual. Each night the sisters carried down a pail of water and bread, whispering scripture they barely remembered. They told him he was being purified. He told them they were becoming what he once was. The townspeople of Monroe County would later swear that they had always known something was wrong in that house. But in the years after the war, every family carried a little madness. No one wanted to look too closely. Before we move further, tell me, what city are you watching from, and what time is it where you are right now? If you want me to uncover what really happened inside that farmhouse, don't forget to subscribe. Next, we'll follow the doctor who returned to Stillwater Creek when the screams started again, months after the sisters were taken away. When Dr. Alton Reeves rode back to Stillwater Creek in the pale winter of 1878, the ground itself seemed reluctant to remember what had happened there. The Byrd sisters were long gone, locked away in the county asylum, but the locals still swore they heard voices drifting up from the farmhouse at night. The sheriff wanted the place sealed, but Reeves insisted on returning, saying, "If evil can root itself in a place, then it must be studied." The house greeted him in silence. Its roof sagged, its windows stared out like blind eyes. Inside, everything remained as it had been left, the overturned chair, the dust-covered Bible, and the blackened hole in the parlor floor where Jonas Byrd had once been chained. Reeves crouched beside it, lantern trembling in his hand. A faint smell of iron still rose from below, sharp as blood on cold metal. When he descended into the cellar, he found only bones of old furniture and scraps of rope. The iron chain that had bound Jonas was snapped clean, one end buried in dirt. Reeves's lantern threw long, crooked shadows along the walls, and that was when he noticed the scratches. Hundreds of them, not just one man's desperate clawing, but layered, overlapping marks, as though several hands had reached for freedom at different times. He whispered to himself, "Dear God, how many were there?" Then came the sound, a dragging step from somewhere deeper underground. Reeves raised his light toward the far wall and saw a door. It was made of black iron, half buried in earth and nailed shut with wooden pegs. The nails were new. Someone had sealed it recently. The doctor leaned closer, tracing a hand across the surface. Beneath the dirt, faint words were carved into the metal. "Forgive us." His breath clouded in the air. From behind the door came a soft rustle, like fabric brushing against stone. Reeves froze. Then 3 slow knocks answered him from the other side. He stumbled backward, hitting his shoulder against the steps. The lantern nearly went out. When he looked up, he thought he saw movement at the top of the cellar stairs. 2 figures, motionless and watching. By dawn, Reeves's horse was found still tethered outside the farmhouse gate. His footprints led inside, but never came out again. The sheriff followed them down into the cellar, finding only the broken lantern, a few drops of blood, and 1 torn page from Prudence Bird's diary. Father said the earth would keep our secrets. But the earth does not forget. That night Stillwater Creek fell silent once more, and those who passed the farmhouse after dark swore they could see a faint glow beneath the floorboards, pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to die. By the spring of 1879, the Byrd farmhouse had become a forbidden landmark, a skeleton on the edge of Stillwater Creek that no one dared approach after nightfall. Yet one man did. Sheriff Thomas Kale, the same deputy who had first found Jonas Byrd chained beneath the parlor floor. Reeves's disappearance had left questions the county refused to answer, and Thomas could no longer carry the weight of them. He arrived at dusk, the sky bruised purple, the wind dry as bone dust. The door opened on its own when he touched it, and that same rotten scent, iron, mildew, and something sweeter, almost like decay trying to disguise itself as perfume, greeted him. Inside, the floor was uneven, as if the house itself had grown tired of standing. Thomas lit a lamp and found his way to the cellar. The broken lantern still lay there, a thin smear of dried blood on its rim. The iron door had been torn from its hinges, its nails scattered like teeth. Beyond it, the earth opened into a narrow tunnel, carved by human hands, damp and breathing cold air. He hesitated, then stepped inside. Each sound was swallowed whole. After what felt like hours, his lamp caught a flicker of white cloth. He reached for it, a bundle wrapped in linen, tied with strands of hair. Inside was a small journal, its cover blackened by soot. The first page bore only 3 words. "Forgive me, Mercy." The handwriting was Prudence's, but the later pages were not. The ink changed, the words became erratic, the tone pleading. It spoke of the nights when Jonas Byrd stopped speaking and began whispering in their dreams, his voice rising from beneath the floor. Prudence wrote that Mercy had started answering him, that she believed their father's soul could be cleansed through union, not punishment. The pages grew darker, lines crossed out, verses from scripture rewritten until they lost all meaning. And then one entry, scrawled in what looked like blood. We opened the door. The doctor would not stop us. He said he heard Mother's voice beyond it. But it was not her. Thomas felt his hands tremble. He turned the final page and froze. A piece of fabric had been pressed flat between the sheets. White muslin, with a child's name stitched in tiny letters. Jonas, Jr. He looked up, and for a moment the tunnel seemed smaller, the air thicker. Somewhere deeper something moved, slow, wet, deliberate. He turned and ran, the lamp sputtering. Behind him came the sound of a soft laugh, 2 voices in perfect unison. Outside, the dawn was breaking. He didn't stop until he reached the sheriff's station. The journal lay open on his desk all morning, its pages whispering in the breeze like breathing. And now I'll ask you the same question I asked at the beginning of this story. What city are you watching from? And what time is it there? If you want me to reveal what became of the Byrd sisters after the tunnel was sealed, don't forget to subscribe. The truth in Part 4 is far worse than anyone imagined. The Stillwater County Asylum stood on a low hill, surrounded by barren fields, and a fence too fragile to hold its ghosts. By 1881, both Prudence and Mercy Byrd had been confined there for nearly 4 years. Official records listed them as quiet, though prone to fits of prayer and long silences. But the attendants knew better. At night, they would wake to the sound of the sisters whispering the same sentence over and over again. "He's still in the earth." The asylum physician, Dr. Luther Wayne, was the first to notice that Mercy's condition worsened whenever the moon was full. Her hands would shake, her nails blackened as if soaked in soil, and she begged to be taken back home to finish what was buried. Prudence, on the other hand, had become nearly mute. She sat by the window, sewing scraps of torn linen into small shapes that resembled infants, each one marked with a red thread across the chest. Wayne recorded his sessions carefully, convinced he was witnessing a form of shared delusion, what modern medicine might call folie à deux. But on the night of June 3rd, his belief in reason began to crack. A storm rolled across Stillwater that evening, and the asylum's lower halls flooded with cold rainwater. The guards heard Mercy screaming from her cell. When they broke the door open, they found her standing barefoot in the corner, her arms outstretched as if in greeting. Water pooled at her feet, and in the center of it lay Prudence, lifeless, eyes open, lips moving soundlessly. Dr. Wayne swore he heard 2 voices speaking from her throat, one whispering "Father," the other whispering "Forgive." He ordered Mercy restrained, but she bit through the leather strap, drawing blood and laughing through her tears. Hours later, Wayne returned to Prudence's body for examination, but it was gone. Only the soaked bed remained, and in the corner, a trail of muddy footprints leading toward the hall, small and bare like a child's. The next morning, Mercy was found dead in her cell, her hands clasped around a small scrap of paper. The ink had run, but a few words remained legible. "He forgave us. Now he waits for you." The asylum shut its doors 2 months later, after another patient claimed to see 2 women walking through the flooded basement, their faces pale as candle wax. When the building was drained years later, workers found iron chains tangled beneath the floor, and a doctor's nameplate embedded in the mud, Alton Reeves. Even now, locals say that on certain nights, if you stand at the edge of the old asylum grounds, you can hear a faint voice under the soil. It doesn't call for help. It whispers scripture, and then it laughs. 17 years after the Byrd sisters' case was buried under dust and disbelief, Stillwater Creek woke to a dry summer morning and the smell of turned earth. The old asylum had been sold to a coal company, and workers sent to clear the land uncovered something their shovels should never have touched. It wasn't a coffin, it was a pit, and inside it were chains. The sheriff who came to investigate was young, newly appointed, and skeptical of ghost stories. But when he saw the iron links curled through the soil like veins, and the faint shape of human ribs beneath them, his expression changed. The remains were too small to belong to an adult man. They looked almost delicate, and there were 2 skulls facing each other, bound together by a single length of wire, twisted tight as a wedding knot. The coroner recorded it simply: "Unidentified female remains, likely early adult. Approximate date of burial, 1878. But he stopped writing when he noticed a small, leather-bound object pressed between the skulls. It was the missing half of Prudence Byrd's diary. The ink was faded, the handwriting uneven, as though written in haste. The final entries spoke of something that had followed them, something that was not their father, but wore his memory like a mask. It called to them from beneath the floor, promising forgiveness if they would let it rise. And they had. One passage read, "We thought we were burying a man, but the man had already gone. What we chained was hunger, and hunger does not die. The workers who unearthed the remains refused to touch the diary again. That night the foreman awoke to screams. One of the diggers had vanished from his tent. In the morning, they found him half buried near the creek. His fingernails packed with black soil, his mouth full of mud. His body twisted as though dragged underground. The company abandoned the site within a week. The sheriff filed his report and sealed the evidence in the county archive, though some say he burned it later that night. Still, the story spread. Travelers who passed through Stillwater spoke of hearing a faint sound near the creek, a woman's voice humming a lullaby that always ended in a prayer. And when the wind died down, sometimes another voice would join her, deeper, slower, patient. Even now the farmhouse stands empty, its roof split open to the sky, its cellar breathing cold air into the fields. Locals avoid it. Children dare each other to go near, though none ever last long enough to reach the steps. But every few years, when the ground shifts and the river floods, something glints beneath the mud. A piece of iron chain, a scrap of linen, or the corner of a page too stubborn to decay. And on that page, the same sentence always appears, written in a trembling hand that could belong to any of them, or to all of them at once. He's still in the earth.